Hey everybody, welcome to Bura. In this episode, I'm going to be talking about the woolly mammoth coming back to life. Alright, welcome back. Before this video, I want to make sure you like and subscribe. The more subscribers you get, the more content we can make. The number one reason why you subscribe to this amazing YouTube channel is to get into the money-making trends before they go mainstream. Alright, so a startup has just raised money to resurrect the woolly mammoth. Now, some people might think that's a good idea, some people might think that it's a bad idea, but there's a lot to talk about in terms of what that actually means. So if you don't know, woolly mammoths have been extinct for thousands of years, and there are multiple kinds of woolly mammoths. In fact, there was a pygmy mammoth that existed on some islands off of California. I know it sounds weird to say that there's a pygmy mammoth, but believe it or not, mammoths actually existed while the pyramids were being built off some of the northern islands of Canada. Now, there's lots of reasons as to why woolly mammoths have been extinct, but there's been a growing effort to resurrect these mammoths. So why did mammoths go extinct in the first place? Well, we don't actually know, but one of the theories is that we overhunted them. That is, early humans overhunted these big animals for meat and fat and hair and skin, etc. But another reason is that climate change, at least in the last 10,000 years, made it inhospitable for the mammoths. And this is probably the more likely option. Now let's talk a little bit about this startup. This startup wants to resurrect mammoths from extinction. Now this is something called de-extinction, and there's a lot of projects going on in this space here. There are a few animals that are extinct, such as the moa, the thylacine, and of course probably one of the most famous is the woolly mammoth. Now of course a woolly mammoth is a big animal, and it would be really cool to see a mammoth in real life. But thanks to modern science, it might be possible to resurrect these mammoths here. So how is this possible? Well, I think pretty much everyone's seen Jurassic Park at this point, but what they do in Jurassic Park is they take DNA from amber and then they put it into modern eggs. And that's exactly what they're going to do with mammoths as well. There are a lot of mammoths that are frozen in Siberia, and since they're frozen and they're not technically that old, the DNA is still intact. Now DNA does degrade, and the chances of making like dinosaurs come back to life is almost impossible, because again, DNA just kind of degrades over time. There is a lifespan to DNA, but mammoths aren't actually that old, and the DNA is a little bit fresher, if you will. So what this startup hopes to do is they'll take DNA from the mammoth and put it into an Asian elephant egg, and then a new mammoth will be born. So because mammoths are extinct, we don't actually know what the mammoth will be, and it probably won't be the exact thing that used to exist. It'll be a very close approximation, but it won't be exactly the same. And one of the reasons it won't be the same is that we don't know what the temperament of the mammoth is and the behavior. Behavior is somewhat learned. There might be some extinctual behavior, but we don't know exactly how these creatures did behave. Now this startup raised $50 million or 11 million pounds, and that's quite a bit of money to launch for something that's, well, frankly at this point, a scientific Hail Mary. We don't actually know if we can do this, and the revenue potentials are kind of up in the air. So why would we want to resurrect mammoths at all? After all, the mammoth is an ice age creature, and well, climate change is not making it a fruitful time for an ice age creature to exist. Well, believe it or not, there is some research to suggest that the mammoths, by trampling down the snow, would reflect the heat back into the atmosphere versus keeping it in the ground. And in the ground, in the permafrost, there is a lot of methane. And methane is a very serious greenhouse gas. And so if the mammoths were to trample the snow, there would be less greenhouse gases emitted, and perhaps the Arctic wouldn't thaw as much as it currently is. So this is, of course, not exactly proven, but there is some good evidence to suggest that this is the case. And one of the reasons for this is that perhaps herding animals in other biomes will reverse desertification and make the biodiversity a lot better. So it's possible that something that would exist up north would also have a very good effect for the Earth as well. So we don't know if we can actually do this, but believe it or not, in the Mammoth Steppe, which is kind of around Siberia, it is pretty cold there. In fact, some of the coldest places and the coldest cities on Earth are in that area. In fact, it's so cold that you can die without any kind of protection very quickly. There's lots of videos on this on the internet. So there could be some areas where it's so cold that the mammoth could exist. Now, it would be really interesting to see if this theory of the snow trampling is correct. Because if it's correct, well, then it would help the whole world deal with climate change. So this is kind of a weird thing to talk about on a tech channel, but believe it or not, there's a lot of technology that goes into it. In fact, we have a Kickstarter that's going on right now that teaches people how to do machine learning and biology. And this is a very good example of why you need to learn machine learning and biology together. And the reason for that is because there might not be enough people that know enough about biology and technology to actually get a job. And that's the kind of the whole point of this channel, is to, well, tell you the money-making trends before they go mainstream. Well, biotech has always been a good place to work. In fact, the startups in biotech tend to either go big or go home. In biology, you have to go through a series of trials, usually phase 1, phase 2, phase 3. And oftentimes when a drug or anything goes through these phase 3 trials, it ends up either being really good for the company or really bad. It could be really good for the company if they pass it, but of course it can be really bad if they fail for it. And I can tell you that biology and this whole startup scene does require a lot of people. And since most biology requires machine learning today, that's why we put out a Kickstarter that did that. So this Kickstarter is the most comprehensive biology and machine learning course out there. So pledge down below. It's really awesome. Let's get back to the startup. Now, of course, there's a ton of money-making opportunities with this. First of all, you can basically charge to see a mammoth at a zoo, which I think would be really cool. I would love to be able to take my kids to go to the zoo. But beyond zoos and, well, meat, there's probably a lot of interest in just getting this technology out there. Because one of the things about technology that I seldom talk about that is super important is that when you build new technology, that technology might be used sometime later on for whatever reason. So the good example of this is the current coronavirus pandemic. Now, in 2003, there was a coronavirus, well, SARS, which was a pretty big pandemic. Now, here's the thing. We could have actually had vaccines out well before COVID existed, but there wasn't much interest. There were some people working on some treatments for coronaviruses and some vaccines, but it didn't really get funded. If we had just funded a coronavirus vaccine 10 years ago, this pandemic probably wouldn't have been so bad. And this is the thing about science and technology. Sometimes you have to fund technology that will get used for something more important later on, even if that fails. Now, of course, this is very hard to explain to a VC, and it's even harder to explain to a VC that wants to sell out and bro down as quickly as possible. But nevertheless, we're starting to see that biology is going to be playing a major part in our lives, and more funding is going into biology. And again, that's why we at Mammoth Interactive made a Kickstarter. And I haven't even mentioned the name of my company yet. I think mammoths are super cool, and I would absolutely love to see one. Furthermore, this might be an opportunity for you to become a biology machine learning specialist. So there's a huge opportunity when there's a few people doing any given kind of task. Now, if there's so few people that know about biology and machine learning, well, then that's potential for you to be a specialist in the area. So if you get your skills to be at a very acceptable level, then you can become an expert in the field, and that will make you a lot more money. And of course, once you get the money, you can start making cryptocurrencies, buying real estate properties, investments. You can do a whole bunch of other things. But it all starts with you kind of looking at where the demand is for labor and going with that. And of course, not everyone likes biology or machine learning, but if you like these two topics, this is your moment to shine. So one last thing before I go. In the article I read, it's possible that the mammoth and the Asian elephant might interbreed. I don't know what elephant Tinder is doing now, but that may or may not be possible. The other thing to consider is that elephants take 3 years to give birth to a new calf. And I would assume that mammoths are probably about the same. It could be even longer. 3 years is a long time. So this is going to take a while, and here's the thing about technology and science. It's not immediate. If you are part of the sell out and bro down crowd, biology is not for you. However, I do think that biology and machine learning is going to be a huge field in the next decade. All right, so that concludes this video. I want to know your thoughts down below. Do you think resurrecting the mammoth is a good idea? Is de-extinction a good idea altogether? And I want to know your thoughts and comments about Python and machine learning and biology. How do these relate? Is it something that excites you? I want to know your comments down below. Remember that this channel doesn't do Patreon, instead we sell our digital products down below. We have this amazing Kickstarter that's extremely relevant to this topic. We have a Kickstarter that has the most comprehensive courses on biology and machine learning. So please pledge down below, because you won't be able to get this course and bundle of courses for this price after the Kickstarter ends. So please, again, pledge down below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in another video.